Hello guys, welcome back to TFD. So, let's talk about that Team USA game, because honestly, this one was rough to watch. Yes, Team USA won comfortably, 91-48, but if we're being real, the game itself just felt ugly. From the start, it looked like the result was never in doubt. With so many WNBA stars on the roster, nobody seriously expected Team USA to lose to Puerto Rico. But even with the big win, the flow of the game just never felt right. The biggest thing that stood out was the pace. Yesterday, we saw what happens when you let Caitlin Clark push the tempo, run the floor, and create offense. But in this game, everything slowed way down. The offense felt stuck in the half court, almost like the ball just stopped moving. It really felt like the influence of Stephanie White's slower style of play was all over this one. Caitlin Clark only played 18 minutes, finishing with 8 points, 2 assists, and 3 rebounds. And once again, the constant lineup changes were confusing. Players were being subbed in and out with no real rhythm, and it leaves a lot of people asking the same question: why isn't Clark starting? At this point, it's honestly hard to understand. Now, to be fair, there were still some solid performances. Angel Reese had a strong game with 10 points and 13 rebounds, securing a double-double. Paige Bueckers also stepped up, leading the scoring with 16 points and adding 3 assists. So yes, Team USA dominated the scoreboard, but the overall performance still left a lot of fans scratching their heads. All right, Caitlin Clark way downtown. Let's check it out. Way downtown. Boom, boom, with a long three. And you could tell Caitlin's game was discombobulated all night long. She did not look comfortable out there, and it just felt like she could never get into a rhythm in this game. This was beautiful. This was a steal to a bucket right here. And Caitlin's gonna jump that pass, steal the ball, and drive it down, get the layup. It was nice. Nice work. I believe there was a foul on that play as well.
Team USA game, because there are a lot of talking points coming out of this one. And honestly, if we're keeping it simple and not overcomplicating things, the best player on the floor for Team USA tonight was Paige Bueckers. It wasn't really that close either, especially when you look at the second half. Paige really took control of the game after halftime. She scored 12 points in the second half alone and looked extremely confident doing it. She knocked down threes, attacked the mid-range, and most importantly, she was willing to create her own shot. That's exactly what you want to see from Paige Bueckers. When it comes to shot creation on this roster, she's simply on another level right now. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't other storylines in this game. One player people were watching closely was Chelsea Gray. And to be honest, it just doesn't look like she's the same player physically. There were moments where she made some solid defensive reads, but running up and down the court looked difficult. The pace just seemed to bother her, and you could see it when she tried to get back in transition. Then you had Angel Reese, who had a really strange game. Statistically, a double-double always looks good on paper, and she did finish with strong rebounding numbers and some solid finishes around the rim. But the overall flow of her game was a bit chaotic. There were a few possessions where she got swatted at the rim and a few odd decisions offensively. On defense, she was extremely aggressive, crashing the glass and fighting for position, but sometimes that aggression actually took her out of the play. Another thing that stood out during the game involved Caitlin Clark. There were moments where it felt like the chemistry just wasn't fully there yet. Clark had set Reese up earlier in the game and clearly looked for her when she had the ball, which made it a little confusing when Reese seemed to look off Clark on a couple possessions. It didn't feel intentional, more like the natural flow of a team that's still figuring things out. Clark herself had a quiet night by her standards. She finished with just a couple assists and struggled from three-point range. But the context matters here. Puerto Rico clearly made stopping Clark their main priority. They slowed the game down, packed the defense, and basically built their scheme around limiting her touches. From what it looked like live, Puerto Rico ran pressure into a zone that always kept a defender glued to Clark. Even when Team USA broke the press and entered the half court, one of the top defenders in the zone immediately shaded towards Clark. They didn't care if someone else was open. The entire defensive focus was making sure Clark couldn't take over the game. That's why the last couple minutes were interesting. In a short stretch, Clark still managed to generate several open looks for teammates just by drawing defensive attention. It showed how quickly she can impact the game when she finds even a little bit of space. As for the rest of the roster, Kelsey Plum had a strong start before cooling off later in the game. Jackie Young looked solid in limited minutes and knocked down an open three. Isaiah Wilson's teammates, like Young, and others continue to show why they're valuable pieces of the rotation. In the end, Team USA still controlled the game, but performances varied across the roster. If we're grading the night overall, Paige Bueckers easily stands out at the top. She played with confidence, created offense when the team needed it, and looked like the most composed player on the floor. So, when you look back at this game, the biggest takeaway is pretty clear. The player of the game for Team USA was Paige Bueckers, and she proved exactly why she's such a key piece for this team moving forward.
We've got to talk about what we just watched with Team USA, because even though the scoreboard says a comfortable win, the conversation around this game is going to be much bigger than the final score. The biggest topic, once again, revolves around Caitlin Clark and the way she was used in this game. Now let's be honest for a second. When you watch the game live, there were moments where it really felt like Clark just wasn't getting the ball. Possession after possession would go by, and you'd see her running up the floor, setting up on the wing, or trying to relocate, and the ball simply never came her way. For a player who is arguably the most dynamic playmaker in women's basketball right now, that's something fans are always going to notice. And that's where a lot of the frustration started to build. Because this is Clark's third season playing at the highest level of women's basketball, and by now, everyone knows exactly what she brings to the floor. Her ability to push the tempo, create off the dribble, and generate open looks for teammates is special. When you let her run, the offense becomes faster, more unpredictable, and frankly, more entertaining. But tonight felt different. It felt like the pace slowed down dramatically. The offense spent long stretches stuck in the half court with the ball moving around the perimeter while Clark was being denied off the ball. At times, it looked like defenders were glued to her, making sure she never got comfortable. When she did give the ball up, there weren't always actions to get it back into her hands. Now, to be fair, this doesn't necessarily mean teammates were intentionally freezing her out. When you watch closely, a lot of what happened was tied to the defensive strategy from Puerto Rico. They clearly came into the game with one main objective: do not let Caitlin Clark beat us. That meant aggressive denial defense, pressure in the backcourt, and constant attention whenever she moved without the ball. In many possessions, one of the defenders at the top of the zone stayed close enough to Clark that the passing lane simply wasn't there. And because of that, Team USA often moved the ball to whoever was open instead. Still, from a fan's perspective, it can look frustrating because we've already seen what happens when Clark is allowed to play freely. In the previous game against Senegal, the offense looked completely different. Clark pushed the tempo, created transition opportunities, and finished with a strong performance that caught national attention. Analysts across sports media were talking about it, pointing out how her presence elevates the entire offense. So naturally, people expected more of the same in this matchup with Puerto Rico. Instead, the game became slower and far more methodical. So that's why the reaction online was so strong. Fans were asking the same questions over and over again. Why isn't Clark starting? Why aren't there more screens being set for her? Why does the offense look so stagnant when she's on the floor? Some of the criticism also turned towards the coaching decisions. Subtle night-up changes frequently, rotations felt inconsistent, and the constant substitutions made it difficult for any group to build rhythm. Basketball is a game where timing and chemistry matter, and when players are constantly rotating in and out, it can disrupt the flow of the offense. But again, there's another side to this conversation. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, Team USA is filled with elite talent. There are multiple players on the roster who are used to being the primary option for their professional teams. When you bring that many stars together, the offense doesn't automatically revolve around one player. Instead, it often becomes a system where the ball moves to the open player, regardless of who that player is. And that's what seemed to happen in this game.
Because Clark's defensive gravity is real. When defenders stay attached to her, it naturally opens space for other players. There were several possessions where teammates were left completely wide open simply because the defense refused to leave Clark. That's something the box score doesn't always show. Even on a night when Clark doesn't dominate statistically, her presence still impacts the way defenses behave. Shooters get cleaner looks, driving lanes open up, the offense spreads out. That's the hidden value of a player who commands that much attention. Of course, fans still want to see more. They want to see the offense run through Clark more often, especially when she's capable of generating so many scoring opportunities. And honestly, that's a fair expectation. When you have a player with that level of vision and creativity, it makes sense to put the ball in her hands and let her orchestrate. But international basketball can look different. Teams often slow the pace, pack the paint, and force opponents into half-court sets. Puerto Rico's strategy tonight clearly focused on limiting Clark's influence and making other players beat them. And in that sense, their plan worked. Team USA still won the game comfortably, but the performance itself felt uneven. The offense lacked rhythm at times, the spacing wasn't always ideal, and the overall flow of the game never quite reached the level fans expected. So moving forward, the big question remains, how will Team USA adjust? Will they find ways to involve Caitlin Clark more in the offense? Will the coaching staff create more actions to free her up off the ball? And most importantly, will we start to see the fast-paced style that makes her such a dangerous player? Because when Clark is allowed to play freely, when she's pushing the ball, reading defenses, and creating opportunities, the entire game changes. And that's what fans are hoping to see as the tournament continues. Tell me what you think. Don't forget, like and subscribe.
I was going to ask that, do you feel like some of the mistakes that you guys made was something that Puerto Rico was doing, or were some of them also a little self-inflicted?
I think it was mostly self-inflicted. I thought we missed on some defensive coverages, and then I think especially with how much we fouled too, like it really limits us, especially in transition when we want to play fast. And it's hard to push, especially off of a made free throws or sitting on the press.
It was obviously a big win by a large margin for Team USA, but what can you say about what you saw about in Puerto Rico tonight?
Yeah, I thought they played with a lot of fire. I thought they were aggressive. I thought the crowd was incredible. Their fans were great, so certainly fun environment to play.
What was the best game offensively for you guys? What would you like to improve upon Italy coming up against?
Yeah, I think taking care of the ball is probably going to be our main focus. I think we could have moved the ball a little bit better. I don't know how many assists we had, but I thought we could have probably passed the ball a little bit better. I think about these games, the paint was really, really clogged, and we want to get easy finishes at the rim, but I think also getting the paint when we're ready to kick it out. I think that's what we do.
And would you say that it was due to Puerto Rico's defense or just offense not
Puerto Rico does a great job, but also I think we can be better offensively.
Kara talked. Kara talked about doing different lineups, different rotations to test out that chemistry. Just how did you feel tonight, yesterday, with all those different
Yeah, I mean,
rotations?
it's going to be a work in progress with everybody trying to kind of find the flow a little bit, especially when we're going 5 in, 5 out. But, you got to be flexible. That's kind of what you were saying. So USA basketball is all about. Some games you're going to play a lot. Some games you're not going to play as much. You might come off the bench. You might start. So you got to be ready when your number's called. I think everybody's done a good job of that. And